Coming up, the easiest way to blow yourself up at a fuel station. Or not. I mean, it really is entirely up to you. I'm John Cadogan from autoexpert.com.au, the place where Australian new car buyers save thousands off their next new cars. Hit me up on the website for that. As you have no doubt brilliantly deduced at this point, you've caught me on the hop. I'm flying today. I'm going from Sydney to Perth, which is one of those really long flights in the context of getting on in one country and getting off in the same country. It's like 4,000 Ks or something, which is roughly equivalent to flying from LA to New York in America. And I guess the only problem for me in 5 hours' time or something when I disembark is I'm not going to be getting off the friggin' plane in New York. I don't know how you feel about flying, but I am fair dinkum absolutely torn by the whole process. On one hand, I find the whole thing preposterously hateful, and on the other hand, it's just outrageously marvellous, and I feel so privileged to be alive in the 21st century and to have lived my whole life with the miracle of human flight. And I mean that quite sincerely, you know. I'm about to get on this A330 and fly in it for 5 hours. It's an aluminium tube that's about 60 metres long and 65 metres wide, including the wings. It seats, 250 to 400 people, depending on how it's configured. The whole thing is an aluminium tube designed as a pressure vessel to elevate itself 6 miles up in the frigging air, okay? And it carries 110 cubic metres of jet fuel maximum. It's got a couple of Rolls-Royce turbofan engines, and they provide a total of about 60 tonnes worth of thrust on takeoff. So it's a giant Molotov cocktail designed to rocket at 0.85 Mach 6 miles up in the air. And I ask you, what could possibly go wrong? Answer: virtually everything. And of course, the reason it doesn't is because of systematic protection and robust human safeguards. And there's a parallel here, I think you'd agree, with this question. Can you explain why service stations in Shitsville refuse to allow the filling of plastic or steel jerry cans on the back of a ute? Surely if static electricity was a safety issue, cars would have an earthing point and fuel pumps would have an earth strap that you attach before filling, like aircraft do. I did ask, but they couldn't offer an explanation of their policy on the issue. I did point out my ute was insulated from earth by 4 big black round rubber insulators. So what's the diff? Here's the thing, okay? I'd like to reanimate all these luminaries from the past, like Isaac Newton and Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo Galilei, and get them together with some of the really A-grade explorers who are no longer with us as well, like James Cook and Magellan, and take them all up in the air for a little joy flight in one of those big aluminium tubes, because I'd suggest they'd have rather a different take on it than you and me. It'd be a whole lot more Arthur C. Clarke, I think you'd agree. So one of the miracles here is that planes don't blow up all the time and flight is accessible to peasants like us. And the same can be said of road transport, right? Because you and I enjoy more mobility than a Roman emperor or an Egyptian pharaoh every time we fill up our fuel tanks or every time we go for a flight. And it is also preposterously safe in the context of human history and transport, because there's never been a benign transport system. So what keeps us safe when we're refueling our cars? Far side, exit row on the left.
Fabulous, love your work.
It is a reduction of a technical miracle to a hateful and mundane process, but still, mainly a miracle. See, one of the biggest things about the refueling process out there in service stations across the country is there's almost no human safeguards imposed in the whole process, and yet these chemicals are some of the most dangerous that you would ever deal with. The thing that's keeping us safe on the service station forecourt is systematic protection, and it's miraculous too, because this stuff is probably, petrol in other words, is probably the most dangerous chemical that most of us deal with on a daily basis. And the biggest threat to safety out there is static electricity. And here, the power really is in your hands. I better shut up, otherwise they're going to tell me to get off. Okay, so that was pretty much the perfect landing. Only 3 criteria for that, of course. Number 1, aircraft not inverted. Number 2, wings still attached. And importantly, number 3, whole thing not on fire. So 11 points out of a possible 10 there, and added bonus, on time. Hey mate, the Parmelia Hilton, please. There's no doubt about it, static electricity is a salient risk every time you refuel the car. But when you're refueling the tank in your own car, that risk is really well managed, okay? It's systematically managed, because you jump out and you get your hand and you touch the pump. And when you touch the pump, you equalize the potential between you and the pump. You're both earthed, so you're at 0 and you can't spark any longer. And then you walk over and you unscrew the cap off the car and you're touching the car, so you're earthing the car as well. And then all those 3 points, you and the pump and the car, you're all at the same potential, so you can't spark and you won't blow yourself up. And all you've got to remember then is don't lock the nozzle on and then, I don't know, go away and faff around in the car and jump back out, because you could be highly energized, charged right up again from static electricity. You'll feel just fine. And then you walk up to the pump and you touch something on the car and you discharge your charge into that expanding fuel air mixture cloud, which is highly explosive. And the next thing you know, you wake up in the burns unit, which is always bad. And for this reason, passengers should not get out of the car and come up to you when you're refueling either, because the same problem can manifest itself. So, as long as you do that, you're pretty safe from the point of view of refueling your own car. With a portable container though, you've got to take a couple of additional steps. They're pretty simple, but you must do them every time, because those portable containers are highly insulated in the tub of a ute, you know, particularly one with a plastic liner, those tub liners, or in the carpeted boot of a car. They're highly insulated from earth, and they can be at some extreme potential, certainly enough to set off a vapor cloud mix and Molotov you to the burns unit. You don't want that. So just get the portable container out of the ute, put it on the ground, out of the boot, put it on the ground, okay, and then it will be earthed. It'll be at the same potential as the pump. And if you want to be really safe doing that, 2 other things, okay? Just reach out and touch the container at the same time as you're refueling. And then a charge cannot build up between the pump and you and the container. It's impossible if you're touching both things at the same time, all right? The only other thing you should do if you want to be totally safe here is throttle back the delivery speed of the fuel out of the pump nozzle. And you do that because fuel has the ability to whip up its own static electricity charge just by moving through the system. And if you throttle it back, you will take that risk a little bit off the table. So the inherent problem here is the fuel tanks, the portable containers, are insulated and they're difficult to earth and they're difficult to maintain in an earthed state if you leave them in the boot or in the tub of a ute. All you got to do is remove them and put them on the ground, and I'd suggest it's a very small effort when you consider the downside potentially, which is blowing yourself up and burning yourself terribly, and this risk cannot be overstated. I had a look at the official advice from WorkCover New South Wales and also from the Centres for Disease Control, which is also a highly accredited and lauded organisation at these kinds of things, and all the advice from them is in line with what I just said. You've got to do these things. Human safeguards from you are essential if you're going to mess around with a portable container. And you just have to bear in mind that 5 litres of the stuff, the kind of small container that you would normally use for mowing the lawn or anything like that, that's more than enough to kill yourself with. So just because it's a small container, just because it feels safe, don't be lulled into a false sense of security. The modern world is flat out awesome. Of this there is absolutely no doubt, because ordinary dudes like you and me get to do spectacularly outrageous things that ancient brainiacs would think is just mad voodoo, and they'd think you were crazy even for suggesting it. We get in aluminium tubes and we rocket across the country, and we put untold amounts of energy in our cars, and we enjoy all of this mobility that is unprecedented in the context of human history, right? But it comes at a cost, and the cost is we live in these artificial environments in tightly coupled systems with a great deal of free energy. And there's a whole bunch of sinister brainiacs in the background who develop these safe systems, and they do it sort of under the radar so that the rest of us never even have to spare a second thought for how inherently risky some of these behaviours are. And mostly you get away with it, okay? But there are some times, such as putting a portable fuel container in a car, where you're on a knife edge and you don't realise it, right? The balance of risk can go stratospheric. It can be so spectacularly dangerous, or it can just be benign and completely unremarkable. And this depends on a small number of human safeguards that it's up to you to implement. So hopefully I've helped you with that. You won't blow yourself up at a servo. And hey, I need all the lovers and the haters, particularly the haters, that I can garner. And I thank you sincerely for following me right across the country today.